This content is brought to you by Link2, which makes private equity investment easy. Link2 allows you to get access to companies before they go public, before they do an IPO. Within their portfolio includes fintech companies, artificial intelligence companies, as well as crypto companies. Some of the big crypto companies in their portfolio include Circle, Ripple, Polysign, Chainalysis, Dapper Labs, Ledger, and many more. So it's a great way to diversify your portfolio to get access to equity. So you may invest in crypto, stocks, ETFs, but now you can get access to equity in these companies before they go public. And obviously that can be very beneficial from an ROI standpoint. So if you'd like to learn more about Link2 and diversifying your portfolio, please visit the link in the description.
Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Paolo Tasca, who's the co-founder and chairman of the DLT Science Foundation. He's also an author and professor. Paolo, it's great to have you on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be here with you and your audience. Happy to be interviewed by you.
For sure. It is a lot of questions I have to ask you about. You wrote an article, an opinion piece in CoinDesk about SEC crypto regulations, Gary Gensler, and much more. You're also doing some work with Hedera, which I'm a big fan of the Hedera network. I've interviewed Mance Harmon and some of the folks at the foundation. So lots of questions to ask you. But let's start with your background. Where are you from and where'd you grow up?
Yeah. So I'm an economist as a background. I've been working with physicists and computer scientists during my PhD, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. I was there studying economic dynamics crisis to understand the contagion dynamics in a network of banks primarily. And it was around basically 2009, 2010, 2012 when basically the Bitcoin started to kick off. So my background is in economics, applied to, it's a kind of physics if you want. So I apply models that come from physics to understand economic dynamics. And that's where I'm coming from as a background. And that's basically the discipline, the models that I apply when I study basically distributed systems like Bitcoin.
And what was your first encounter with Bitcoin, and what was your aha moment? When did it click for you?
It was, I think, 2011, more or less. Probably 2010. I don't remember exactly. I was basically a ETH Zurich, and I came across some colleague of mine that were basically talking about this Bitcoin, and I was a bit skeptical. I was thinking about something like a Lindell dollar for, Second Life. I was a bit skeptical about the applicability. But then I started looking into it, and my colleagues were kind of my colleague, one particular colleague, was a kind of an enthusiast, especially because the data was open and transparent and available. And, we as at that time, young scientists working with data was like the holy grail, because generally data is very expensive and to get data is very, 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 very difficult, and something that Elon Musk and many other tech giants know very well when they sell their data. The possibility to work on a kind of a monetary system that was emerging, where data were basically free and available on demand, was something exciting for my colleague at that time. I was also interested in that area as a researcher, but at that time I was already using Mt. Gox. I don't know how many remember Mt. Gox was basically the only exchange platform back in time. Yes. So it was from Japan, and I was one of the customers that at the end got bust because they run they have this they went bankrupt.
Right.
And I was a bit interested to look into these business dynamics because it was the only platform back in time, really. I think it was driving the 80% of the whole trading in the whole market.
Right.
So in the world. So I say, why we don't create a crypto to crypto or crypto to fiat exchange platform rather than just doing research? There is nothing in Switzerland. There is nothing probably in Europe. I say, so let's start working. It's not so difficult. So we know how to master it. And that's how I started to build something in Bitcoin, not just as a researcher, but also as an entrepreneur.
Oh, sure. So it sounds like that led to the founding of the DLT Science Foundation. Tell us about what the foundation does. What's the mission?
Yeah. Well, from that point until the DLT Science Foundation, many things happen, right? So I had even the chance to become a central banker for a few years. So I was working as a central banker in Germany, and I brought to the German central bank the cryptocurrency research area. So I did create a team and explore that area. Excuse me. At the central bank. So I created a team to explore the decentralized finance, P2P finance. And then I moved to London. I created the Center for Blockchain Technologies at the University College London.
Mm.
Then a few other things like the DEC Institute, which is basically an institute that provides the professional certificates for digital asset experts. I did create and advise a few other, top cryptocurrency projects. And lately, I did create the DLT Science Foundation.
And for the DLT Science Foundation, is it a lot? The work being done, is it a lot of research, working with governments and industry companies and things like that?
Well, we have a the mission to promote and to set the grounds for the establishment of a smooth adoption of distributed systems in business and society through expansion of knowledge. So and we do this basically working on three pillars, which is basically promoting education programs, promoting research activities, and innovation programs. And we do this through a network of universities, which basically are supported by us with our grants, working with the University College London, with the University of Zurich, with the IIT Madras, the London School of Economics, Peking University, and US, the National University of Singapore. And we do also have a network that we're building of talents, of experts in the field that are coming either from academia or from the industry, which are basically the so-called DSF Science Fellows. And they are basically promoting these, education, research, innovation activities around the world. We start from, the concept that, blockchain require, blockchain adoption require more knowledge, a more, wider level playing field among the actors and the players, because we encounter that there is a lot of preconception, or there is a lot of misunderstanding of what blockchain, what crypto can bring to business and society. So we have this educational mission, and we are doing this through this activity. We do this through a collaborative model between academia, industry leaders, and startups, and also governments and regulators. So we also try to close the cycle and work together with these three main players in this ecosystem to foster the adoption of this technology and the understanding of the potential not just the risk, but also the potential benefits of this technology.
Yeah, that's great. There's certainly a lot of educating that's needed around the globe, and it's still a new concept for a lot of people. It's some have a hard time understanding blockchain and the benefits. So that's really great that the work you guys are doing. You mentioned you worked at the central bank in Germany. And question for you: this is a hard question, but do you foresee central banks and different governments maybe 10 years from now holding, let's say, Bitcoin as digital gold the way the central banks have been holding physical gold on their balance sheet? Do you see that being a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. This is a possibility. We have seen, this happening already at some government level, with some small governments like Central Africa or El Salvador. So digital scarcity is not different from physical scarcity. And the fact that on the top of the Bitcoin core principles, there is an entire industry that flourishes, a multi-billion-dollar industry that flourishes. Then Bitcoin is not just basically the so-called digital gold, but it is also instrumental for an entire basically industry to flourish. Like if you want gold, per se gold is not much instrumental. It's somehow instrumental in the industry. Some industry use gold for tooling and or in the private domain we use gold for jewelry. But I mean, the reason why gold was set as a standard reserve was because of its physical scarcity rather than for its industrial application. There was a kind of limited industrial application, though. The same, I think, we can have this type of example with Bitcoin. Bitcoin basically is digital. Is basically the synthesis of digital scarcity in a digital age that open up a completely new industry of possibilities of different tokens and layer one cryptocurrency infrastructures, layer two NFT that will have a implication in the metaverse and so on. So the tokenization that is happening, not maybe in Bitcoin, but maybe built on other platforms that could potentially be like Ethereum or other platforms, is somehow an industry dynamics and wave that take its origin from Bitcoin. And inspiration from Bitcoin. And governance model of Bitcoin is also a source of inspiration for many of these applications. So if you project these in the future, you say 10 years, something like that, or even more, you see that there will be much more assets that will be tokenized. And when everything will be tokenized, because it's not a problem of technology, it's more a problem of legal frameworks. When everything will be tokenized, then we may ask ourselves who we are to say what money is. It's very difficult to then distinguish money from any other asset, cash from any other assets. As we will move toward a kind of away from cash dependency, right? So because everything will be cash at the end, because everything can be tokenized, and Bitcoin is at the core of this transformation that is happening, that will take decades. So probably yes, it could enter the reserves of central banks in the near future. Absolutely.
And then you mentioned tokenization, and we're seeing central banks are tokenizing fiat currency on the blockchain, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. What are your thoughts on that? It seems like the natural evolution of money. However, some folks are concerned with will there be the proper guardrails where there's not a social credit system and things like that, and our rights, let's say our right to privacy to a certain degree is maintained. What are your thoughts on CBDCs and the future of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to answer this question because we are really at the beginning. The design of CBDC depend very much on the political view of the governments, and depend very much on the democratic principles of the governments. Because the technology underpinning CBDC blockchain, but I mean, although some central banks say, okay, we can create a CBDC without blockchain, but I don't see this very much pragmatic. I see very much more interesting if blockchain is used. So if we stay in this domain, blockchain as a business process technology, if you want, can be adjusted, and this is basically the dual side of this technology. This basically flexibility to be adjusted toward the direction of of the concept of money. And of course depend very much on which concept of money do you have, the direction of this BDC can take then. So there is an interesting observation of the difference between account-based CBDC or token-based CBDC, and the debate that is taking place around these and the different design models that the different central banks can adopt are the result of these different interpretation of democratic principles, because the difference between the account-based CBDC and the token-based CBDC is the tentative solution of a triangle of impossibilities, which stand on scalability, throughput, performance, control, security, so the ability to maintain the ledger secure against attack, and privacy, so the ability of auditing or governance. So if you have an account-based solution of CBDC, then you prefer scalability and security over privacy. And CBDC would be more akin to a bank deposit. If instead you have a token-based solution, then on this triangle you prefer privacy and security over scalability, and you have a CBDC more akin to a cash. So you see, also in this perspective, you have different type of potential design choice that can be made, and this is not really easy solution, because this design choice that will be made eventually by the different governments or public agencies will be based they will bend basically the technical choice into their democratic view of society. And of course, it's very risky and very blurring, if I may say, the border between privacy, compliance, and surveillance. So, and you can see how these three very much the border between these three are very much difficult to define. You have a lot of flexibility on this.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more discussions that need to happen. I know there's a lot of pilot testing that's taking place, but hopefully, I'm in the United States. I'm hoping at least, let's say, with the Fed and the digital dollar, they were able to align it to the Constitution, right to privacy, and the proper guardrails are put into place. In different parts of the world, like you said, it just depends on their democratic process and their Bill of Rights and things like that. Now, you're also doing some work with Hedera, and I've spoken to some of the folks at Hedera. I'm a big fan of the work they're doing. Tell us about that and your work. Are you in an advisory role there?
Well, with Hedera, we are doing quite a lot of things. I'm not an advisor. I represent the University College London in the council. You know that the Hedera ecosystem is governed by these council members.
Oh, right.
Which are basically these, mostly these are corporations, even big corporation, Fortune 500 corporation, and some universities. University College London is basically the first university that joined the council. So we were the first one, and since then I'm representing University College London in the council. Moreover, I took on some more responsibility by being more involved in the tokenomics design of the Hedera, talking about crypto economics, staking, rewards, and node rewards, and so on. And I'm co-chairing this the so-called CoinCom together with the Lemon Bird. So that's my activity with Hedera. Moreover, the DLT Science Foundation is supported and endorsed by and backed by Hedera, who is the main donor behind. And with them, we are doing quite a lot of activities and initiatives along the mission of the DLT Science Foundation. So in the area of education, innovation, and research. So that's what we do basically at the moment. So, for example, in the education we have done recently, we have co-organized with the University of Zurich the so-called Zurich Summer School. Was a 3 weeks summer school where we cover basically a lot of aspects around blockchain, tokenomics, security, governance, and we did organize a few master classes. We also organized some seminars, workshops, also to help and educate the regulators around, also, I mean, to educate the industry about the new regulations.
Sure.
And yeah, and a lot of activity around in the innovation area with hackathons. So we are doing one on building oracles on Hedera right now, and other hackathons are coming in the next week. So we are very much engaged also in that area.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I things I'm a big fan of Hedera, so I see all the great work they're doing. So it's sounds like you're advising them on a lot of things, and working with them on a lot of things as well. So let's talk about crypto regulations. The EU and the UK seem to be moving at a much faster pace than the US. You had recently in July written a opinion piece in CoinDesk about how the SEC and Gary Gensler have been handling crypto regulations. There's a lot of confusion and frustration here in the United States, with the SEC suing a lot of good actors. Their Coinbase, the Ripple lawsuit ruling recently. Grayscale is suing the SEC. What are your thoughts on what's happening here?
Well, it's a very unique case with the United States. It's very complicated at the same time. I mean, when I was a central banker in the past, talking about more or less 10 years ago, I was advocating for more transparency, for more clarity, for a rule-based, regulation rather than regulation by enforcement back in time. And there was a saying among the circuit of some regulators that say, okay, at the beginning, if it is too small, we do ignore it. If we start to become a bit too big, we try to regulate it. If we are not successful in regulating it, we kill it. So I see that in the US we are basically somehow we have been ignoring this market for so many years. So it's about 14 years that Bitcoin was brought to the market, and nothing has been done. Very little has been done from a pragmatic point of view for investors, for end users, for innovators. Very little. I think we are in the second phase now at the moment. But the agencies in the US are not is my personal opinion, are not doing really they're not really serving the retail investors, and not even serving the economy if they perpetrate these enforcement actions and regulation by enforcement. SEC in particular has two tools in its arsenal that can. So the first one is to establish guidelines and set expectations on forward-looking basis, and this could take the shape of formal notice and comments, rulemaking, or informal documents. And this is basically a way to guide the industry, to set expectation, and to have to steer a new industry, a nascent industry, a new industry like could be the one for crypto. The second tool on its arsenal is the enforcement actions based on pre-existing rule, and this is done ex post. With respect to conduct that the SEC can deem be in violation of existing regulation. So, these two, tools are available, and for what we have seen in the recent, so to say, interventions of the SEC in US, we have seen, a predominance of the use of this second type of tools. Which is not really, helpful, because, as I say, it's not forward-looking, and it is simply a sanctioning, ex post sanctioning approach based on conducts that seems to violate existing regulation. So, so the problem is that we have rational players, like, as I wrote in my CoinDesk piece, like SEC officials that try to create some rules by enforcement and not ruled by regulation, and this is basically hyper rational, working in an environment where there is no clarity and certainty. So the problems that come when you look at the markets, because the markets to blossom, expand, and grow need clarity, need certainty, and this preemptive attack against all crypto. I was shocked, for example, when I saw the chairman of the SEC interrupting the managing editor of a CoinDesk, claiming for 3 times in a row that all cryptos are securities, all crypto. So based on what? So why the chairman of even a chairman of an important agency like this interrupt a journalist with a lack of partiality and fairness with these bold statements? There is, I think, it's very much arrogant to pretend to apply, rules that with this approach, which is basically this. As I say, that is the regulation by enforcement. This approach that apply these rules that are basically being built for a financial world over 200 years ago. So we are in a transformational age of exponential technologies, and new technologies are creating new technologies. The amount of data that we created in 2022 is more than the amount of data that we created and consumed in the previous 10 years. So, and this is exponentially growing. By 2025, we are going to more than double the amount of data that we create and consume in 2023. Blockchain, AI, and all these technologies are technologies that handle data, help to process data in a transparent, peer-to-peer manner in a trustless environment. So, these are technology applied to finance, and if you look at the financial world now, it's completely different than 200 years ago. So, how you can adopt this ex post regulation by enforcement, applying rules that are basically designed for that type of world, where basically instead of rethinking new taxonomies, rethinking new way to redefine the financial products, to reconceive the financial product, and probably even a new fintech regulator should be established to better navigate this complexity of emerging digital technologies. So that's my comment on the position that the US is taking. So it's missing the opportunity here. And I see, many big players in this field that are basically moving outside the US. This is $1 billion damage for the UK, for the US economy. That is not, it would be lasting for decades. It's not easy to revert back. And I've seen a more, forward-looking approaches in other countries. So I hope, there will be a chance for the US to rethink his approach to this industry and become return to become the leader in innovation, even in this sector.
Yeah, and I see different members of Congress are working on different regulation bills, and it's making progress, but we haven't gone through to the voting and approval on the floor, the House floor, and then the Senate and stuff. But then there was, I think a lot of the members of Congress are using the Ripple case ruling from the judge of the crypto asset itself intrinsically is not a security, and it depends on the packaging, how it was sold and things like that. Any thoughts on the judge's ruling in the Ripple XRP lawsuit?
Yeah, is basically a practical example of what I just said. So the failure or the limited, fundamental limited impact that regulation by enforcement produced when regulating emerging technologies like blockchain and other technologies. So by definition, these are not established technologies, are emerging digital technologies, and is a kind of a moving target. So the problem of applying this approach of enforcement, which is, as I said before, an ex-post approach, address issues that they already been occurred. So Ripple was brought to the market in 2015. We are 2023. So Ripple was in the market for many years, and no one told to Ripple, this can be done, this cannot be done, in a clear statement for many years. And the enforcement actions are basically serve as a kind of a lagging indicators, right? So the fact of it is that this action can be outdated due to this rapid evolution of the industry. Ripple XRP has evolved a lot since the 2015, and this type of approach really offer little forward-looking guidance to the other market participants. Nice. So this situation is this case XRP SEC is a practical example of the failure of this approach.
For sure. And hopefully Congress here in the United States can act and get something through. And hopefully they can get something through this year, if not next year. I wanted to get your thoughts, because I know we're coming up on time, on PayPal launching a stable coin. It seems like there's going to be a lot of different stable coins out there in the market. in the digital economy, you were talking about stable coins possible in the Hedera blockchain and other different blockchains and different companies launching their own. What are your thoughts in this world that we're heading in with different stable coins, different CBDCs, and much more?
Well, I'm very much in favor. I wrote many years ago about the branded coin concept. I think is a super powerful concept if big corporations are entering this space. I mean, we are much more mature now than in 2009 when Bitcoin was brought to the market. The fact that the currency is not a monopoly of cannot be just a monopoly of the central banks. Indeed, if you think the central bank is historically speaking is a recent invention, like around 200 years before we were basically we didn't need the central banks, and we didn't need a centralized control of money, but we used money. So many economists over the last decades have been, promulgating or promoting the private use of money. I remember Friedrich Hayek that in the 1976 wrote this book on denationalization of money, but also in the early 80s, Milton Friedman was promoting, an automatic control of the monetary policy through some sort of algorithms, and the Bitcoin is
right.
Fantastic first example of distributed control of money in the digital space. So I'm very much in favor of private to private and private to public competition when it comes to money. Because this will basically be very much beneficial for the society, for the economy, for the businesses that can have more flexibility to choose which type of units or to exchange for goods and services. And as I said before, who we are to define money, in the sense that there is this long-term trend, which is basically taking place since many decades, even before the invention of Bitcoin, which is basically to the trend of liquidity transformation, transforming illiquid assets into liquid assets. And of course, technology now can help us to accelerate this process of liquidity transformation. So, in a society where everything is liquid and can be exchanged seamlessly at the near zero marginal cost, at the speed of internet, what is cash, what is money. So I think this is something that the industry understand, the central banks understood. We talked before about the CBDC, but the CBDC is just the peak of the iceberg. The central banks are redesigning their role within the economy. The invention of new products driven by this new technology are challenging the foundations of and of the role of the central banks in our society. So what is the central bank? What is the need of the central bank? What are their relationship with the commercial banks? What is the relationship with the households, and so on and so forth. So we're going to see a lot of these transformations, which are technology-driven transformation. So in cash, money is basically the first one to be addressed by this transformation. So we will see more competition. We remember Libra, DM, the attempt by Zuckerberg to bring this world coin to the market. Probably was a bit naive from some point of view, but this gives you a sense of the direction of an entire economy. And it will be not the first time, if you think that the private sector supplement the public sector to provide a public good services. So many streets that we do, run over every day, or many utilities are run by the private sector for public goods. So money can be the same, and money serve a public is a public good. Provide a public good service in order for the economy to to flourish and smoothly functioning, but it doesn't need to be the public sector to provide this service. It can be very easily the private sector. And if you think, the commercial banks are private most of the time, and the commercial banks are already helping the central banks to distribute the cash to the society. So we will accelerate this process of private public competition.
Real quick, what do you think about WorldCoin? Because to your point, competition and different options coming out there, what they're looking to solve some real problems, with they mentioned UBI and privacy, and helping to get people on the blockchain with their data. But the orb, a lot of people feel it's a bit dystopian. Any thoughts on that? Merge of AI, crypto, blockchain, UBI, things like that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is another attempt. When I saw this WorldCoin attempt, I said, okay, this is another attempt similar to what Zuckerberg did a few years ago, and they will try to kill it.
Yeah,
because it's too powerful concept. Some governments are not ready, right? We can talk a lot about pros and cons of hardware, and it would be much easier for everybody of us to attack, these products for many angles. I saw the article on CoinDesk by Vitalik Buterin that was attacking the WorldCoin project, but I think that is a forward-looking some ultimate is a forward-looking entrepreneur, and I think we will need more entrepreneurs like him that try to solve some pragmatic real problem with the use of new technologies. And yes, the question is whether they will be good gatekeepers of our data, privacy, and so on and so forth. But I think this is something that there is a kind of a stark choice here between a different type of options that are basically second best choices for in all cases. So I think that overall the direction that the market is taking is toward creating solutions that give back power to people, give back control indeed of data to people. Then do we have any bugs? Do we have any backdoor, intentional or unintentional? This is a second order effort. But I think the overall macro direction is very, very promising, and I'm supportive.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely in agreement there. So I have some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. I don't have any idea here around. But as I said, I mean, I'm working in science, I'm working in promoting education and knowledge. So I will promote a metaverse where everybody can have fun while learning. So, and learning is earning. So if we increase, if we connect the fun part with learning, then we also promote earning at the universal level. So I will promote education and learning, earning.
That's great. I got some rapid fire questions for you. Favorite food?
Oh, well, being Italian, I would say pizza is my favorite one. Absolutely.
Favorite musician or band?
I mean, I'm a bit old, so I'm a bit fan of 80s period. So Depeche Mode is one of my favorites. I don't know if you know, is this British electronic band. They were one of the pioneers in in bringing electronic music back in time. So
For sure.
like them.
Favorite movie?
The movie, I mean, well, I have a lot of movie, but I'm very much inspired by those dystopian movies like or series like a Black Mirror that was very much successful in the recent years on Netflix, because they give us this a bit sweet and sour spots between technology and society, and how this can influence each other. It's something that especially in the emergence of a highly technology-driven society, bringing more attention to ethics and this type of social impact of technology is something that I pay a lot of attention. So Black Mirror was kind of inspirational to me on this.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And favorite book?
Well, I enjoy very much The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shohana Zuboff, a book that I would have loved to write myself. So I recommend everybody to read this book.
And when you're not working at the anything crypto blockchain, what are you doing for fun as a hobby or pastime?
Yes. So I do enjoy very much going out at galleries, and I enjoy art. So contemporary art, and I read a lot about politics. So I enjoy both.
Paolo, pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you to you for having me here.